sessions. Welcome everyone to session 3 of our Gaza Summer School. Today we're going to be talking about Gaza, freedom flotillas, and peacemaking, of course. I'm Noor, I'm Code Pink's Palestine campaigner, as some of you may know. And I'm really glad you're all here for our 3rd session. This has been a great program and we are planning on continuing that today. So I'll pass it over to Danica, who is going to get us started with our first speaker.
Hi, everyone. If everyone could stay muted, that would be great. I hear a lot of background noise. I'm Danica. I'm the National Co-Director of Code Pink. Just to go over our norms, please introduce yourself to the chat, your name and location, and a reminder to stay muted throughout the call. And like I said before, we are live streaming, so if you want to change your name or turn off your camera, you're more than willing to, you're totally able to do that if you don't want it on our live stream. Be respectful. This isn't a debate, but a discussion, and we're not here to mediate arguments. We're here to learn from each other and take action for Palestine. Be kind to each other, please. Be curious and be ready to take action. And again, please stay muted unless we're sharing. And we are so happy to have Anne Wright here. Anne Wright has been part of the peace community for 20 years and serves as a member of Code Pink's board of directors. And I will also note it's her birthday, so everyone, if you want to give a happy birthday to Anne in the chat, that'd be great. Before that, she was a U.S. Army colonel and Army Reserves for 29 years. And retired as a colonel. She was also a U.S. diplomat and served in the U.S. embassies all over the world. She resigned from the U.S. government in March of 2003 in opposition to Bush's war on Iraq, and was also on the Gaza Freedom Flotilla in 2010 that attempted to deliver aid to Gaza when the flotilla came under fire from the Israeli military. And she's also part of the effort to revive the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, which is actually the topic of today's Gaza Summer School, to talk about the flotilla and Anne's travels to Gaza, to raise up the humanitarian crisis and look at the context of Gaza even before October 7th. So Anne, thank you so much for joining us. We're so happy to have you here, and happy birthday.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you all. And congratulations to Code Pink for having this summer school on Gaza. It's really important that we provide as much information as we can about what's going on in Gaza. And the summer school really provides us a great opportunity. And yes, indeed. And we'd like to congratulate Noor for her work at the Republican National Convention to show what some congressmen, how mean they are. And we're glad that you are not arrested and that charges have been dropped by this really mean congressperson, one of many that, you know, Code Pink is in the Congress every single day here in Washington, D.C., and we've really seen some of the, you know, the really uncivilized speech by some of our Congress people, and it's really demoralizing to see who our representatives are and how they know so little really about Palestine. So thank you all for hosting this.
Thank you, Anne. And you've been in the halls of Congress and you've been in DC for a while, doing this work and educating members of Congress. And you're actually able to speak from firsthand experience about the conditions caused by the blockade of Gaza. So would you be able to, maybe we could start off with that. Can you share with us about your experience in Gaza, what you saw, and maybe why you felt the need for a Gaza Freedom Flotilla?
Well, actually, the Gaza Freedom Flotilla began before I even went to Gaza. The very first people that tried to get boats into Gaza did so in 2008, and it was called the Free Gaza Movement. And in a few minutes, I'll show you some pictures of those very first boats, and really the only boats that have been able to go into Gaza in 40 years, really, until this pier of the Central World Kitchen and that one barge that was offloaded, and then the Rube Goldberg U.S. military pier on which several ships unloaded cargo that still really has not gotten to the people of Gaza. But the civilian movement of trying to show the world that the naval blockade, the illegal Israeli naval blockade of Gaza that's been going on for 50 years now, that it needed to be broken, as does the air blockade. You know, there's the one airport in Gaza was torn up by the Israelis when they left in 2005. And then the land blockade, where no one can go in or out of Gaza by land unless there's agreement really with the Israeli government on one side of it and the Egyptian government on the other. But now that portal on the Egyptian side is controlled by the Israelis. I went first to Gaza in 2009 with Medea Benjamin and Tig Berry. We went there right after the 27-day Israeli attack on Gaza that had killed, I think it was 1,200 people in that 27 days. And we saw on TV the limited coverage that was available at that time showed a level of destruction that I, as somebody that had been in the U.S. military and had seen a lot of destruction, at least in the pictures, we were stunned by the level of destruction. So we went in January of 2009 to see with our own eyes. We barely got into Gaza. The Egyptian border guard said, you can go in, but you better get back out in 24 hours because we're closing the gates again. And if you're not out, you're going to get stuck there for we don't know how long. So we went in and took lots of pictures and came back committed to bringing groups in. And in 2009, Code Pink hosted, I think it was 7 different groups to go first to Cairo and then go by bus overland to the Rafah crossing, and then being met on the other side and taking groups of people in for 5, 6, 7, 8 days. And it was followed at the end of 2009 by the Gaza Freedom March, where we had 1,350 people from 55 countries that came to go into Gaza on the anniversary of that horrific Israeli attack of 2009. Unfortunately, the Egyptian government double-crossed us, and not all the 1,300 got in. In fact, only 100. But you can still to this day, people will come up to me in various parts of the world. So I was on that Gaza Freedom March, and it was really important because we were there in Cairo, and what we did as activists from the international community, we were doing things that the Egyptian activists could not get away with under the Mubarak regime, and certainly not under the al-Sisi regime now. All that to say, in 2010, I was contacted by the Free Gaza movement saying, we are going to have a flotilla. And if you're interested in coming to observe it, you're welcome. So I went to Greece and ended up as it turned out, on the Challenger 1. In fact, let me share a screen. I can show you some pictures of this because it's really, let's see, which one was it? Was it this one? No, it's down here. Okay. That one, share. Okay. Now. Okay, so we have got Gaza flotillas, and let's see if we can get okay, I'm screen sharing now. I need to be able to okay, there you see. Okay, here's the two little boats that came into Gaza in 2008. You can see the second one is behind this first one, but you can see they're tiny little boats. And here's Howeida Arif, who is working still with us on the Gaza flotilla. She's a Palestinian American and one of the co-founders of the International Solidarity Movement, ISM, that does a lot of protection work in the West Bank. And she's on the bow of one ship, and then we have the ship, it's a boat, really, tiny little boat, and on the other side is a second little boat. And how they got in was so crazy. I mean, here it was, this is Latif, who is a great cartoonist, you know. How did these two little boats get through the Navy blockade, the Israeli naval blockade? We still are not sure how that happened, but those two boats came again. They made two trips, and then another boat called the Dignity at the end of 2008 came, and you can see there the Israeli Navy finally said, nope, we're not going to let any more ships come in of these international activists. And what this was to bring international attention to the blockade. And on board this boat was Marie McGuire, Nobel Peace Laureate, Cynthia McKinney, at that time former U.S. Congresswoman. A lot of pretty big names were on this, and a CNN reporter, Carl Penhole, who actually started broadcasting from there. And it was really the first time that CNN started covering the illegal naval blockade of Gaza. After that, let's see, I'll come back and do a little YouTube and you can see some of these little boats. But after that, in 2010, was the Mavi Marmara. This was a flotilla that was of 7 ships, and the lead ship was this big ship that carried 600 people, and it was called the Mavi Marmara. And it was the one that was attacked by the Israeli military. In fact, all 7 of the boats, and I was on one called the Challenger 1. All of our boats were attacked. People were beaten up on all of them. On the Mavi Marmara, 9 people were shot by the Israelis, really executed, and some of them from helicopters that were hovering above the ship, and the commandos were shooting down onto the top of the ship and just killing people outright, including one 17-year-old Turkish American, Furkan Doğan, was killed on the top of this boat. Here's a picture from taken actually from our boat. We were alongside of the Mavi Marmara when the Israeli attack started at 4 in the morning. And you can see some of the stuff that's happening there. This was also taken from our boat, and you could see in the foreground one of the Israeli commando boats that was circling around and then would try to come up next to the boat and try to get their commandos to climb up the sides of the ship, which they ultimately did, and ultimately took control of the ship. Another one of the ships of the flotilla is the Stefani, which is a ship that had about 75 people on board. And there you can see 2 of the Israeli boats that are coming up to board that boat. All of the 7 boats were taken. We were arrested on the high seas and international waters, not the waters of Israel, not the waters of Gaza. We were about 70 miles offshore when we were seized, arrested, taken against our will to a place we didn't want to go, which was Israel, and put in Israeli prison for 3 to 5 days, and then deported. One of the aspects of these flotillas is that if you are stopped by the Israelis, in which every one of them, the 35 that we've had since 2008, every one of them has now been stopped. And the passengers and crew and captain taken to Israeli prison and then deported from Israel. And with that deportation, it's a 10-year deportation that you cannot get back into Israel. Therefore, you can't get back into Jerusalem. You can't get back into the West Bank. So we caution people who volunteer so kindly to want to be on these boats to challenge the Israeli illegal blockade of Gaza, that if they have family in the West Bank, or if they work with NGOs and part of their work is in the West Bank, then we say better not to go on these flotillas because you will have a 10-year deportation. And I've been on in Israeli prison 2 times, so I have a 20-year deportation. But that doesn't mean that you don't keep trying. And there'll be another deportation, I'm sure, quite soon. Let's see. So let's go on down to, this is the back of a t-shirt, actually the back of the t-shirt that I have on right now that says "Break the Siege." This is our current t-shirt for one of the two types of flotillas we're doing this year. On the back of this shirt, we have all of the 35 boats listed and the dates that they have sailed. So this is not, it wasn't just a one-time deal in 2008 or in 2010. We've had boats that have been going in 2011. We had actually 10 boats in Greece, and then the Israeli government paid off the Greek government not to let the boats sail from Greece. Later in the year, two of the boats silently, mysteriously disappeared from Greek waters and turned up other places and then sailed to Gaza. We've had boats in 2012, 2013, a project, a very interesting one, where we decided we would help fishers in Gaza convert an old fishing boat into a cargo boat to try to take cargo out of Gaza, because the blockade means that people of Gaza don't have their own way to transport goods that they make and agricultural products that they make. It all now has to go through Israel, and Israel sometimes takes the goods, sometimes doesn't. Many a time, beautiful vegetables and fruits just sit rotting in Gaza because the Israelis won't help export those. And the export of flowers is another, beautiful flowers is another one of the exports. But as they cut the flowers in Gaza and send them to Ben Gurion Airport to be flown to Europe, sometimes they just don't make it, and the farmers lose everything. So we decided we would help build a cargo ship and sail from Gaza. Well, the Israelis are watching these things. In fact, the Israelis watch this much more than anybody else does. And one day, the cargo ship, which was already just about finished, we had it floating in the water, and all of a sudden it started sinking. And it turned out that there had been a hole blown in the bottom of it. And as we got that bit of sabotage fixed, the next thing was a rocket that was blown right into Gaza's Ark, as we called it, and burned it up. So we've been through a lot of difficulties with the Israeli government. The government does not want us to sail. They don't want us to bring international attention to the illegal naval blockade. And so they have torpedoed and sabotaged quite a few of our boats. So we have to be very cautious about how much information we give out about them, because we know that people are watching and listening. But that doesn't mean we don't keep trying. And here are some of the other ships that we've used, some of the 35. Some of them have been sailboats, and this was this one actually was in 2018. We had 3 small sailboats. In 2016, though, we had the women's boat to Gaza. Woman captain, all women crew, all women passengers on the boat. Now, I was one of them. We had a Nobel Peace Laureate, Marie McGuire, again, was on board. We had an Olympian, woman Olympic sportswoman from South Africa. We had a total of about 50 women who were on the various parts of the voyage that started in Barcelona, and then Ajaccio, Corsica, France, and then Calgary, Sardinia, then down to Palermo in Sicily, and then off to Gaza. So the women's boat to Gaza was a very, very interesting one, and on a sailboat. And then here's another one of this is more a converted fishing trawler, the Marianne, that came from Sweden. And then this is the one that we are using right now. And this is taken while it was up in Norway, but you will see that it's been decorated quite a bit. Now you can see it in the background. whenever we go into ports, we ask if there are graphic artists that want to add something to the boat. So by the time the boat actually sails toward Gaza, it has artwork that you would not believe. It's just beautiful. And in every one of the ports, and for this one, the Gaza, this particular ship is called the Hondola. The Hondola has been, we used the Hondola last year in Northern Europe in a small flotilla. And we were not going to bring it down into the Mediterranean last year, but this year we have. And we've been to ports in Norway, Sweden, Germany, the Netherlands. We had to skip the UK. We waved as we went by, but there was a big storm and we couldn't go in there. But then into Ireland, into France, into Portugal, into Spain. Now the Hondola is in France. And at every one of the ports, we've had just great outpourings of solidarity from the local community and the local Palestinian solidarity groups. So it's really a wonderful, wonderful way to, it's a vehicle, a vessel for Palestine solidarity. And so here's some of the people that were on board at one of the stops. We change out the crew and passengers or participants. The crew changes not too frequently, but the passengers or participants that are not crew members, we try to have different people on each leg of the trip so that we will give this opportunity to as many people as possible. So here from the United States on this particular season of Hondola, we will have had 10 US citizens on board, one in each of the various legs of this. So that is some of the resources. Just put something in here. We do have documentaries that have been made about the flotilla, particularly about the Mavi Marmara, one called Midnight on the Mavi Marmara, and the other one, Truth Lost at Sea. So we can send these links to you so that you can use them if you would like. And we do have on board right now, we have a documentary film team. So we look forward to having their documentary of this short phase of the flotilla. So that's one ship. And we do have another group of ships that you may have heard about, and those are the ones that are in Turkey. And we're calling that the Break the Siege. And let's see, I may do one more screen share real fast here because I think I did have some pictures in that. Just a minute, of the 3 ships that we will. No, that's not the one I want. Okay, I'll just tell you about it. 3 ships that are in Turkey, and we brought about 120 people to Istanbul in May, intending to have those 3 ships sail together as a flotilla in May. The night before we were putting passengers on the ships, the government of Guinea-Bissau, which had flagged 2 of the ships, withdrew the flagging, and based on pressure from the United States and from Israel. So we have, since May, we have been working hard to try to get the flagging of those ships, and it has been very, very difficult because there are a lot of pressures on the governments that actually issue flags to not issue flags for these ships. So we are involved in a brouhaha with a lot of countries trying to get these ships reflagged so that we can sail them again. And we're hoping we can do that this summer. The folks who have signed on for this have been very patient. And I would say now being very impatient, as we are too, as the organizers of this, because we want to sail, because the whole point is to bring more international attention to what's going on in Gaza and with the genocide that's going on, And with the lack of food, the lack of, I mean, it's just horrible what's happening, the lack of medical supplies. So having these ships saying that we as citizens, citizen activists, we are acting when our nations will not act. And it is a dangerous proposition. And this is the first time that we will have sailed boats during combat operations. So we know exactly what the Israelis have done to the Palestinians. We know what they've done to international aid workers, and it is a dangerous proposition. But we intend to sail and bring attention to what the Israelis are doing to Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank too. So that's kind of the roundup of what the flotilla is all about, and I'd be glad to answer any questions and take comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne, for that super comprehensive walkthrough of, and really highlighting how this has been something that's going on. This isn't just something that happened 10 years ago and now it's happening again. But I just want to ask, so, after seeing all these issues that you guys have been running into in the past, all the sabotage on these ships, and even now, all these obstacles that are getting in the way of you sailing, and also on the opposite end, that relentlessness and that motivation to keep going and to keep, being persistent and wanting to deliver this aid to Gaza. To you, what does that represent? And, what does that say kind of about the state of where we are right now and, what you see for the future?
Well, it's a bleak future. I mean, it is terrible what the nations of the world are letting Israel get away with, and our U.S. government being complicit in the whole thing with providing money and bombs and munitions and jet fuel and everything that the Israelis need to keep the genocide going. So that's why we as U.S. citizens particularly are out on the streets. In fact, we were over at the Watergate hotel and condo complex, the notorious Watergate this afternoon, because that's where Netanyahu is going to be staying during his 3 days here in Washington, where he'll be speaking to the joint session of Congress and going over to the White House. Well, he's gotten a very unwelcome arrival here in Washington because it is horrific what the Israelis are doing and what we are as U.S. citizens are complicit in unless we try to stop this. And it's not only us. I mean, we have the U.S. Boats to Gaza, and that's our national campaign, usboatstogaza.org. But we have 11 other national campaigns that are a part of the Gaza Freedom Flotilla Coalition. They're from all over the world, from South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Brazil, Norway, Sweden, UK, Ireland, France, Spain, Turkey, and the US. So all of those, each one of those nations has a national campaign that helps organize within its nation and to keep the citizens aware of what's happening. So it's something that we as citizens can do. It's a concrete action we can take. And a lot of people say, well, you can take a lot of concrete actions and you don't have to get on a boat and you don't have to sail it, and it's an expensive proposition, and all of that's true. But there is a small group of us compared to the larger Palestine Solidarity Group who still maintain that it is important to let Palestinians know that we're trying to do something concrete to help. And when you see the pictures of the kids in Gaza who go out to the beaches and make designs on the beach when they know that a flotilla has left and it's coming to Gaza, and even though no boats have gotten in since 2008, still they go out to the beach. Still they keep track of where our boats are. And that gives them, we hope, some hope, that they're not being forgotten. And it's our little drop in the ocean, so to speak, on that.
Thank you so much, Anne. And I know that it does mean so much to Palestinians, especially those in Gaza, to feel that type of hope. And it's amazing that you guys continue to try to deliver aid to Gaza and try to have the flotilla reach. There was a lot of questions in the chat. We're gonna revisit them after the second half of our session, which is going to be about de-escalation, so that we can kind of take all the questions together. So if you guys have a question that you didn't already drop in the chat for Anne, please do so now, anytime before we take questions at the end. And I'm going to pass it to Danica to introduce our next speaker. Thank you again, Anne, and happy birthday again.
Thank
Happy
you so much.
birthday, Anne. We love you.
Thank you. Love you all.
Grace put a couple links in the chat that I think will answer some of your questions on the status of the current flotilla and also how the world responded to the Gaza flotilla raid. I actually wrote something on that, and Grace put the link in the chat a couple times. It's Gaza's Our Human Responsibilities, the beginning of the title. Talk about how President Obama responded to that. So I hope it can answer some questions. But for the second half, I'm going to pass it over to Jasmine, CodePink's regional member coordinator, for a training on de-escalation, a very important skill for keeping everyone safe while in action. Just a reminder that we've been using the second half of these to give hard organizing skills to our folks. So, you know, we had to use de-escalation tactics a couple times at the Republican National Convention last week. And, you know, we're going to a lot of protests. We're doing a lot of risky actions. So it's good to have this skill under our belt. So Jasmine, thanks for coming on. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. One of the hosts, oh, JK, I already did it. Y'all are great. So we don't have a ton of time, and I'm always going to preface something like this with the fact that this is a topic that is really in depth. It takes hours to fully get trained on, and I really encourage folks now, and I'll repeat this at the end, to get trained in de-escalation in your local community with the folks that you organize with. But in the time that we have, I'm going to share some basic tips, tools, and tricks that anybody can keep in their back pocket for de-escalating conflicts of many levels. With, again, the large caveat that we really encourage folks to practice de-escalation, get trained up in de-escalation. Whenever planning an action, right, your security plan and your safety plan makes a huge difference in terms of the likelihood of escalation and risk, right? But we can't fully predict everything, right? As we have seen in the last 10 months, and for folks who have been in the movement for Free Palestine for over 40 years, right, there's tons of retaliation for speaking up for liberation. There's tons of and counter protesters, staunch Zionists, who will show up, who will be combative, who will want to argue and debate and scare you, and in some cases, physical harm, right? And so we, in this space, again, can't get into some of those higher level escalations or details, but those are things that you should be talking about regularly in your community, right? It's not to scare anybody, but it's to be realistic and be prepared. So that's what we're gonna dive into right now. So what is de-escalation, right? Escalation, if we want to define that, is to increase the scope or extent of a possible conflict, right? That might look like high volume, less space between parties, inappropriate content or language, erratic behavior, physical touch, stepping into personal space, right? And so de-escalation is when we are trying to lessen the extent or volume or scope of a possible conflict. Things such as lowering the volume, slowing our pace down, increasing the space between parties, using trusted messengers, appropriate language, active listening, and then really, really important, and what we're going to talk about today is dialogue and discussion. So just some notes here, right? Again, conflict and escalated issues is not something we can completely avoid, but we can do our best to plan for and be prepared for, right? This looks like, you know, in terms of every single one of us, things that we can do is being aware of our surroundings at all times, when in actions, protests, no matter what, right? And this goes hand in hand with using a buddy system, affinity group, right? Whatever it is that works for you, you always want to be going to a protest or action, not alone, but with someone who is aware and responsible for your well-being as you are with them, right? Someone who maybe knows your triggers, your safety, your boundaries, your important information, right? That y'all are accountable for each other and watching the space that you are in together. When planning actions, right, you want to have a dedicated security or safety team and a safety plan. You might consider marshals, specifically trained de-escalators, on your team, right? For example, I organize here in Dallas, we have folks who are on our security team. They're not there to police protesters or be micromanagers, right? Their entire job is just to watch the crowd, to be aware of potential escalations and conflicts and counter protesters, and they're trained and ready to step in if de-escalation is necessary. Clear communication channels is another one, right? Especially when we're in large spaces, when we're spread out, when we have large crowds, right? Anticipating conflict requires that we are able to communicate with each other, right? If there's something happening on the East End, folks on the West End need to know that it's coming, right? These are small things, but they really make a huge difference in terms of being able to de-escalate a conflict as soon as it arises versus something growing out of proportion, right? And then the final reminder that risk assessment is a part of action planning, both on an individual level as well as the level of the whole action, right? Every person going to an action, a protest, anything should assess and know their own personal risk level, right? They should know what they are and aren't willing to do. Am I someone who's comfortable with conflict and able to step in and de-escalate a situation? Or actually, am I someone who's not great under pressure? And I probably shouldn't be stepping into someone else's conflict because I'm not going to make it better, right? And then in terms of our overall risk assessment when planning actions, right? Can we anticipate counter protesters? Do we know, are the Zionists in our area planning an action the same day as us, right? Do we know if our target for the day is high risk and we can just go ahead and anticipate escalation from the police because we're going somewhere protected, for example, right? Escalation can come from so many directions. So a big part of planning an action, and that's again, as a regular attendee, or if you are the action planners, right, is trying to anticipate areas where risk and conflict may arise as much as possible. And we'll get into that some more. So we're going to go through a couple of strategies and tools around identifying, anticipating, and then responding to conflicts in the moment. Again, I'm going to go through these relatively quickly for the amount of time that we have, but these all will be shared with all of the participants in the post-summer school email. So there will be lots of resources. Many of the ones pulled here today are from the beautiful Trouble Toolkit, which is a resource toolkit with lots of resources, handouts, et cetera, for organizers. And folks who have been doing de-escalation and action planning and conflict resolution for a long time have put together some really helpful acronyms, reminders, and just tools for us to use in moments that we need them. So this first tool, called Early Warning, Early Response, is a guided process for preparing for actions so that we are able to prepare for and respond to potential conflicts when they occur, right? So step/strategy number one for dealing with conflict, right, or escalating issues is to prepare for them, right, as much as possible. What do you need to take to the event? What would you need to be better prepared? What might you need if there's a short time to respond? For some examples here, right? If you are anticipating counter protesters, do you need to set up a physical barrier between the group that you are there and with and protecting, right, your protesters and the outside space, right? We don't rely on police and other folks to create the space for us. That's often creating kettling situations, but we can provide our own physical barriers, right? Or with people, right? Do you, again, need to specifically have marshals and de-escalators spread out throughout the crowd? That's something you can prepare for so that you can see conflicts as they arise, right? There are so many ways in which the de-escalation happens before you get there. Strategy number two from this tool is assessing indicators and responding, right? So noticing when a conflict is arising is huge. So one of the questions here is, what will be an indicator so that you know there's a threat? Some examples, right? You see someone kind of circling the crowd at a protest or other action. They're not wearing any affiliated apparel with a friendly organization. They're not wearing any carrying any signs. They're not chanting or participating. Maybe they're more focused on recording the crowd than they are in recording people's faces than anything else, right? Maybe you see them talking to the police a lot. Maybe they're completely alone. They're not with anyone, nobody around, right? This is not a practice of like profiling for the sake of like profiling and expecting to harm folks, right? But these are how we notice and spot folks who are intending to come and cause harm, to wreak havoc, right? What are some other indicators in the situation that you'll be in so that you can know that there's a threat? Again, this also includes noticing police behavior and activity, right? If you thought this was going to be a chill, low-key action, really no police presence necessary, and you're starting to see trucks from 3-4 different precincts arriving, right? Y'all might want to prepare for the situation to be shifting, right? There are so many ways in the moment where you can kind of be prepared for what is something we can spot to let us know something might be happening, right? Again, if you're marching and you're starting to feel like y'all are being kettled, right? Pushed into one direction, a corner or alley by the cops, right? There are ways that you can respond when that's happening. Before that happens, you can turn your entire group if you notice in time, right? Being aware of our surroundings is so important when it comes to escalation. Having a specific plan in place for your de-escalators, right? So again, in the most ideal situations, we will have a team of trained de-escalators on site, right? Who can be prepared to step in when situations arise. And so what is the plan, right? We're getting into some tools and some ways to approach it today, but what you're actually going to do in the moment and how you as a group decide to respond to rising conflicts is up to you all, right? Another example, here in Dallas, oftentimes in the groups that I organize with, when we get a heckler, right, someone who just wants to come and yell really evil and genocidal things at us, what we tend to do is actually just take a couple members from our security team, surround them, and then protest louder with them. Yell our chants louder. Just let them drown them out, make it so that nobody's touching them, nobody's coming in contact with them, but they don't get to heckle us peacefully. We're going to be louder. We're going to surround them, our backs to them, right? Making sure that they know that we are not here to respond or engage in whatever baiting they're trying to do, right? That's one possible tactic of how we're going to deal with someone who's just there to yell at us, right? There's so many ways that people can kind of coordinate and decide how to deal with folks depending on how they're trying to escalate. And again, what could you do to make yourself safer? What are areas in which conflict or incidents occur most frequently, right? So again, things such as being kettled into a back alley, more likely to cause an issue. Or if you know you're specifically doing an action outside of the government office, more likely to be coming in contact with like state police or whatever else it may be, right? To continue this tool, strategy number 3, really quickly, is mapping safe routes and meeting points, right? So sometimes conflicts do get out of hand and they do escalate and people scatter, right? We want to be responsible for our folks. And if something does occur where the best option in the moment is flight, is to run, right? Folks ought to know where are safe routes, where are safe gathering points, right? There's some things that we try to like to communicate with folks in advance. If we do a large mobilization in DC, right, we like to say, hey, this is the code ping meeting spot. This is where you can come back to meet us at this time. Or if you get disconnected, this is how you can find us, right? That's part of being highly visible, making sure your people can find you in pink. And things such as where might risks come from, right? If you are anticipating, if there is a risk that you can anticipate, where might it come from and how can you maybe avoid it? And then again, just think about being, when you're a kid and your family's planning for an emergency and they're like, if anything ever happens, we're meeting at the mailbox, right? That's something you can set up with your buddy at any action. If you and your buddy get separated because, again, police arrived and you weren't expecting it, or you got separated by a car that drove through the rally, right? You have a meeting point. Because something else to always anticipate is that when we're in large crowds, service often doesn't work, phone service, communication on the ground. Again, having a meeting point can be really helpful. And then finally, for this tool, thinking about how we're communicating, how do we communicate to our larger community, right? It can be really scary when you maybe didn't go to the action today, but you're hearing reports of, there was something happened, there was a fight or someone got arrested and you're not really sure what happened and no one's saying anything, right? This is just kind of getting that, how do you communicate to your larger community? If there is an interaction with the cops or an arrest or something of that nature, how are you getting messages out that are really important? Right? If there is a plan change or if there are counter protesters that folks need to be aware of, right? If the action is over and everyone's going home, but you heard word that cops are rounding people up near a subway station, right? Just thinking about how you can make sure you're communicating with your whole team. So that's a lot of information. Again, this tool is more focused on how we can prepare for conflict because that's where a lot of de-escalation occurs. It's not letting it happen in the first place, or at least trying our best, right? So another way to actually approach in the moment, right? So now we're getting into, now you're at the action, you're at the protest, you're at the rally, you're in person, right? Or, this also works in other varieties. How do you actually respond in the moment to developing conflicts? So I'm going to run through this quickly, but again, these are tools for folks to study and to practice with their folks and use example scenarios. But this first one is the ABCs of conflict response. Really helpful. I love acronym, right? And these are super useful. A is standing for assess. You're assessing the scene and identifying the conflict. Always step one, right? What is happening? Who is doing what? What can you do? What are the risks, right? I know these are a lot of things to try to think of immediately and in the moment. This is why we move in teams, right? But you have to identify who are the actors. So often there will be, ruckus breaking out at an action and we can't even tell what direction it is. There's some ruckus over there, but they're actually just chanting really loud. The fight is over here, right? Making sure we're very clear about where the conflict is, who is involved, where our attention needs to be. The B is really helpful, right? Breathe. Take a moment and ground yourself. I know it can be really hard to remember this in the moment, right? But we are humans who have an entire, I can't remember the name of the system, but the cortisol and the adrenaline, right? Our bodies jump into fight or fight. We have to know the extent of what we are and are not able to do in the moment, what makes sense as the best approach, right? There are so many factors, right? Just taking a moment to breathe can make a huge difference in terms of how you approach a conflict that you're trying to de-escalate. And then C, choose if you will get involved, right? A lot of times you are simply being a bystander. You're becoming an impromptu legal observer and you're pulling out your phone to record. You're going and finding the nearest de-escalator, right? This still applies to you, even if you are not the one doing the active de-escalation. You still get to choose what makes sense here. What action can I take? Do I actually just need to get away and not be involved at all? Can I be useful in this situation, right? Can I take again, record? Can I find someone who can help? Can I grab a medic, right? And then if you choose to be the de-escalator, there are a list of tactics we'll get into in just a moment, right? That's your next step. You've assessed the situation, you've taken your moment, you've decided you're going to intervene, right? And we're going to get into those next steps now. And then in some cases, if escalation is actually what will help you reach your goal, right? We talked about this at the beginning. Escalation simply means pushing and making motion in a conflict, right? Moving forward. And you could be the one to decide that, hey, the stakes are high. We need to escalate. There are so many contexts in which that might apply. We won't get into that today. But what does D mean, right? What are the actual tools for de-escalating? So this is another tool from Beautiful Trouble called the 6 Ds of assertive intervention. This is actually getting into the how, the what, what do you do in the moment? These are just a handful of options for how to actually de-escalate a conflict. So number 1, direct intervention, right? This is you directly standing up, going up to whoever the person is, the people who are causing the conflict or the escalation, and using open, non-threatening body language with your hands visible and empty, right? We all are kind of familiar with how to approach someone in a way that is clear that you are safe and approachable. Using active listening is a huge tool, right? You want to make sure that the person who is involved in the conflict hears you. And this is where I want to pause and maybe step back, because I realize I've been framing all of these escalations as necessarily negative, but oftentimes escalated issue can also not necessarily be harmful, right? It could be someone needing medical attention, right? It could be someone needing some mediation, but they're on the same side, right? There are so many things that this can look like. So when I say, active listening, this is not me telling you to go listen to every single word of what the genocidal maniac is yelling at you, right? But it's remembering that you do have to assess and figure out what the situation is at hand, right? So you want to listen actively and understand what's happening. And if it is just a verbal interaction, altercation, something of that nature, letting the person who is feeling high anxiety, high emotion, high, etc., know that you're listening to them and you're here to solve the problem, right? Lowering your volume, slowing your movement, right? Kind of think about it as an elementary school teacher, how they interact with kids, right? Do not touch angry people. And I'll add the caveat, do not touch anyone at all, right? It's a huge no-no. Do not place your hands on anyone for any reason, including the police, including people who are in your own camp. But if they're in escalated activity, right, you want to try to refrain from touching people and sudden movements. And then appropriate, content, be flexible. Again, use things like singing or chanting if they are helpful to you, right? If you can kind of use that as a way to get in between folks who are escalated and elevated and high energy, but actually that's all, we just really need to break them up and get them away from each other, and that's it, right? Just get in there, chant louder than they can yell at each other, right? And get them away from each other. Those are all options. But aside from direct intervention, right? Aside from getting really in there with those folks, you have other options. So number one is delay, right? Wait it out. Again, if these are your people, right? If you notice that two folks who are in your camp, in your organization, that are safe with you are getting into an argument about who gets the bullhorn, or about a direction to take, or politics on the spot, right? Sometimes there is an option to wait it out, but keeping an eye on a conflict, right? A lot of conflicts don't actually need us to act right away, but we just need to be aware of them. Another option is to distract. Again, directing folks' attention elsewhere. A lot of conflicts will ease and kind of fall away if we simply get folks focused on other things, redirect them, give folks other tasks, right? Delegate. Work with a buddy or allies, right? You should almost never be going into de-escalation alone, whether you're directly intervening or using any other variety of tools, right? The moment you spot something that's going wrong, you want to alert somebody else and not be the only person aware of the conflict, right? And then delegate. If your strong suit is not direct intervention, but you can distract everyone else around to get away from the conflict, minimize extra folks, and let the escalator focus, right? That's a really useful place to be. Distance, right? Putting space between you and the problem, right? If there's a huge crowd of counter protesters, sometimes you just want to give them the space. We'll go somewhere else. Y'all can have it, right? Or a heckler is, following you around or whatever, just putting space between the person trying to create a conflict and everyone else, right? And then document. Most importantly is documenting, right? We should always have legal observers at every single action, no matter how basic it is, recording. That's their whole purpose. But again, no matter who you are and what your role is on the day of, if you notice something happening, documenting is of utmost importance, right? If anything escalates to court, to liability, to anything, right? We want to make sure that we have clear evidence. So these are a couple of tools of assertive intervention, right? How we can actually get into the meat of de-escalating a conflict. But again, and I'll keep saying, right, this is not something I can ever provide in 30 minutes to everyone, but we really encourage folks to take the tools that we're sharing and start these conversations in your group, right? If you're someone who is action planning regularly, I encourage you to increasingly incorporate security, safety, and de-escalation planning in your work. We've seen just last week, right? Congressmen themselves are not above from unnecessary escalation if it fits their agenda, right? We really want to be prepared wherever we go for folks to not see our vision for peace and instead come towards us with the intent for harm or escalation. And we don't need that. This is just one additional tool, kind of like the ABCs method, that's just really helpful for in the moment how to respond and reflect and act on the issue, right? Again, another acronym: center yourself and whoever's in the action. Listen deeply. Again, that's the active listening. Affirm the dignity of the person, right? This again is most useful for like an argument type of situation, right? Affirm that, like, hey, I know tensions are high. I know that y'all are valuable humans and y'all both want to be right and feel like you belong in this space, right? Respond. Again, this works best for kind of conversational conflicts, right? Try open-ended questions and moving the folks involved toward concrete actions and next steps. And then finally, always ending with, again, further resources, next steps. Hey, you may not be done with this argument between you two, but I'd appreciate it if, at least for the rest of today's actions, y'all keep y'all's chill for everybody's safety, right? That's a behavioral request you can make in the moment. So those are a lot of tools, resources, et cetera. Again, I'll keep repeating that practice makes preparation. It's really important that you are familiar with the counter protesters / possible threats in your area. It's important that you practice with your people, right? Role playing might seem really funny and awkward, but I'm telling you, it saves lives and it does a lot to help those of us who are not naturally good with conflict become prepared, right? We can practice de-escalation with our groups so that we are more prepared in the moment. Everyone should get trained in de-escalation. If you're in your local Code Pink chapter, talk to your regional organizer. We will make sure you find someone who can do this with you. And that includes like getting your legal observer training, getting direct action training, right? Train your folks, be prepared, stay ready so you ain't got to get ready is how my folks say it. And then finally, reflect on past actions, right? We learn the most from our own mistakes, histories, lessons, right? And so learn from how you've handled escalated issues in the past and how you can move forward from there. And then, yeah, no, I'm out of time. So just couple final reminders, right? Expect the unexpected. We always do our best to plan, but things happen really quickly in person. Again, on the ground communication is important. Reminder that cops often escalate more than they de-escalate. So do your best to keep your distance from them. Most issues we can typically handle ourselves and that don't involve like literal policing each other. For the most part, you don't want to engage counter protesters unless necessary, right? If they're not in your face, in your camp, causing y'all harm, if they keep their distance, keeping our distance is the easiest method to follow. And then finally, plan for your leaders or core organizers' arrest or incapacitation, right? You don't want ever to have all the information centered in just 2 or 3 people, because if something happens to them, we want to keep everyone else safe and make sure that everyone is prepared, everyone is trained, and everyone knows what to do. So that was a lot of information. Again, I will drop my email in the chat. My whole job here is to make sure that our organizers, our local organizers and our chapters are prepared and get these types of trainings. Happy to provide more information. And then finally, again, every resource that I shared today, every method, tool will be shared in the follow-up email.
Thank you so much, Jasmine, for sharing that. Yeah, we will be sharing that in a follow-up email. So if you didn't write everything down, that's totally fine. You'll still be able to reference that information later. Okay, so let's take just a couple questions since we don't have much time. Anne and Jasmine, I don't know if you both want to leave your emails in the chat, just in case people want to ask you questions directly. But it seems like the number one question we've been getting is, to Anne, what is the current status of the flotilla? Where is it right now? And what's the plan for it? And then also, how can people get involved if they want to?
Thank you. Well, we do have one boat, the gondola that I mentioned before, that will be departing, and we're not telling the exact location of it, but departing in the early part of August to head toward Gaza. The other boats that are currently in Turkey will be later on in we hope in the month of August. If you want to get involved in it, we would love to have your help. You can start out by going to usboats2gaza.org, and that's our website. And you can also follow the progress of the gondola on US Boats to Gaza and also freedomflotilla.org. So just you can contact us through the US Boats to Gaza if you want more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. So I think the other questions we're gonna have to take them over email. It was a few, but I think honestly the biggest one was what's up with the flotilla this year. So thank you both so much for joining us and for sharing your wonderful information and insights with our summer school gang. So our next session is going to be Monday, August 5th, which is 2 weeks away at 7 p.m. Central, as always. We're going to be talking about art and resistance in Palestine, and we're going to have Mary Hasboun on, who is a musician and artist. And we'll also have Danica on talking about movement building and the belly of the beast, which is, where we're at here in the US and these other Western countries. A couple things. We have our Bought by Zionism page that we have been, mentioning on these calls a bit. We do update it constantly with new information. And there's so much to research and to add on to there. So if anyone here wants to volunteer and help build up the Bought by Zionism website, please get in touch with Farida. Her email is farida@codepink.org. Grace will put it in the chat. But the website is a really great tool to uncover sort of like the layers and the system of Zionism here in the US, and how that really allows Zionism to flourish, and the state of Israel to continue to get away with what they get away with. And then also really quick, first of all, thank you everyone in the chat who's being super sweet about me being released. It was just a little hiccup. It's fine. But we are still like wanting to do everything we can to hold Representative Derek Van Orden accountable, who is the representative who accused me of assault. And the charges were swiftly dropped. But we are going to ask that folks send a complaint to the Office of Congressional Ethics against Derek Van Orden, just to, you know, hold him accountable for his actions and his abuse of power as a member of Congress, which I was repeatedly told by different agencies, both federal and state agencies, that the reason why I was treated the way I was because Derek Van Orden is a member of Congress. So, you know, super important for us to not allow that type of abuse of power to just fly by. So if you guys want to send a letter, Grace put the link in the chat. Just make sure at the bottom of the letter you sign your name off where it says your name, just so you don't send a letter to them that says your name at the bottom without your actual name, because that just wouldn't look very good. But that's everything. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Anne. Happy birthday. Thank you, Jasmine. I look forward to seeing everyone here again in a couple weeks. And I'm just going to play this song that Anne sent from the Women's Boat to Gaza, just while everybody's on their way out.
Really quickly, we are really encouraging everyone to get involved locally where they are in organizing. August is when members of Congress come home. So if you see what we do in DC and asking them a bunch of questions, walking with them down the hall, you know, being confronting them about their stance on Gaza and Palestine, you can do that too, because they'll be in your district all of August. So please get involved locally. You can go to codepink.org/onboarding to start a local in your area. We have people go through an onboarding first, or sign up to be a local organizer. It's on our homepage, and you'll be connected to a regional organizer if you're in the South, West Coast, East Coast, or abroad. So please sign up to organize locally with us.